Well, we're finally here. After 4 years of build-up, we're finally at the movie that DC couldn't wait for. It's time for Justice League, motherfuckers.
Come together right now over me.
Justice League is the type of movie that's almost impossible to talk about without mentioning the production history. Justice League was going to be the third movie in the DCEU directed by Zack Snyder. Snyder had already proven twice that he was incapable of making a good movie with these characters, and essentially shot his own universe in the foot with his second attempt. When the first teaser for Justice League was released, it looked exactly how I expected. It was the same visual style, and the only difference was a slightly lighter tone. Unfortunately, Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide, and he decided to step down as director to be with his family, which is totally understandable. At this point, Warner Brothers had already brought in Avengers director Joss Whedon to rewrite some of the scenes they were unhappy with, but after Snyder stepped down, Whedon was put in charge of the post-production and ordered to do 2 months worth of reshoots. On top of that, Warner Brothers imposed restrictions on the movie because of the reception the last 2 Snyder films received. The film was originally meant to be a 2-parter, but it was later mandated that it be under 2 hours, which is a harsh contrast to the 3-hour-long cut of Batman v Superman. Despite all the setbacks, Warner Brothers refused to push the release date back, and Justice League came out to the public in November of 2017. So, did this clusterfuck pay off in the end? Only one way to find out. Let's take a look at Justice League. So the movie takes place sometime after the death of Superman. Batman has been fighting off random monsters who feed on fear. One of them leaves a symbol of 3 boxes behind, causing Batman to begin investigating their meaning. He comes to the conclusion that an alien invasion is coming to Earth, and he looks to gather a team of metahumans to fight it off. He quickly gains Diana Prince as an ally, and the 2 of them go out to seek the other metahumans shown in Lex Luthor's hard drive. These other metahumans include Barry Allen, Arthur Curry, and Victor Stone. Batman's prophecy soon comes true as the Earth is attacked by an alien demon known as Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf wants to turn the Earth into a new version of his own world and works to steal the 3 mother boxes to accomplish his goal. It's up to the Justice League to stop him and save the Earth. If that plot sounded familiar to you, that's because it's the same plot as Man of Steel. It's another bad guy who comes to Earth to terraform it into a version of their home world. And just like Man of Steel, I have to ask, why the hell does he need to do it to Earth? Can't he just do it to any world? Whatever. Unlike Zod, Steppenwolf is just pure evil, so I'll allow it. But is this really what people wanted for a Justice League movie? Did they just want a repeat of the first installment of the DCEU? The Justice League coming together should feel epic, and it never does here. Partially because of the lame plot, but also because they didn't earn any hype. When you look at the Avengers, 4 of those characters had their own standalone movies that built to their team-up movie. In the DCEU, only 2 of them had standalone movies. You can't even really count Batman v Superman as a Batman origin story, considering half of that movie was also about Superman and Lex Luthor. And Suicide Squad has almost no connection to Justice League at all. 2 movies is not enough to offset the imbalances of introducing 3 new characters like this. I think they could have gotten away with skipping the Flash's origin story, or maybe even Cyborg's if you really want to suck away the humanity from that character. But someone like Aquaman should have had his own movie before this. The same goes for Batman, him more so considering he is a major player. Again, just like I said in my Suicide Squad review, there should have been a Batman solo movie after Man of Steel. This whole setup is incredibly rushed. Because the movie spends so much time trying to set up and introduce Cyborg, Flash, and Aquaman, there's very little exposition to ground us in what's even happening, and it cheats to rush characters from point to point. For example, when Batman kills a parademon, it leaves an impression of 3 boxes. Why? There's no reason for it to do this, and for no reason, it causes Batman to begin an investigation into these symbols. What if it died and just looked like a chunky mess of flesh? Would Batman still investigate that? Apparently it's because the symbols were in Lex Luthor's notes, but Lex Luthor didn't learn about Steppenwolf until right before he was arrested, so he would have had no time to write that down. Also, that was only in the extended cut, so if you didn't waste 3 hours of your life watching that, then this would make even less sense. Also, Batman is convinced that an alien invasion is coming, but we are never told how or why he thinks that. He just does right at the beginning of the movie, and we're told to take it at face value. They just want to rush everything. The backstory to what the mother boxes are and who Steppenwolf is told after he already gets one of them. This should have come at the beginning of the film, because without any context, this battle against the Amazons means nothing. It's just some monster man I don't know trying to get a MacGuffin I don't care about. It's just dumb. But what's even dumber is the explanation to the locations of the mother boxes. One box was given to the Amazons in Themyscira, another box was given to the Atlanteans, and the last one was given to man. Now, the Amazons and Atlanteans guarded their boxes with their lives, but do you want to know what man did with the other box? They threw it in a fucking hole. I am serious. They put the box in a random ass hole and buried it. If it's that important, then obviously you should guard it. Who's to say Steppenwolf wouldn't be able to find it in a hole? What if he just came to Earth like...
Aha, I found it.
I'll give this film credit that the opening Batman scene is pretty cool. Gotham looks like a perfect mix of Burton and Nolan's versions. The lighting, the Dutch angles, and the Danny Elfman score make this whole scene play out like a lost Tim Burton movie, which I really liked, especially with Ben Affleck's Batman. This scene where he dangles the criminal is just like the Burton film. Unlike the previous Snyder attempts, this film has a noticeably lighter tone, which is sort of a double-edged sword. The tone makes this film inconsistent with the rest of the DCEU, so it doesn't work as well as part of that universe. But if you watch it as its own movie, then the lighter tone helps to a certain degree because when it's not taking itself too seriously, I can suspend my disbelief a bit more and just turn my brain off and have fun with it. But even with the lighter tone, there's still some things that are just too stupid. This scene of Wonder Woman blocking these bullets reminds me a lot of Deadpool blocking bullets in X-Men Origins. It's so cartoony and dumb. Some people say that this tone shift was solely due to Joss Whedon, but there was some comedy in the first trailer as well, so Snyder also contributed to it. I'm sure most of it was Whedon though, and the comedy throughout the film is 50-50. I will say it's painfully obvious that this film was color corrected from whatever Snyder's version was to make the film look brighter, which I understand the logic of considering Snyder's last two attempts seem to hate the sun, but it looks off-putting at times to have these harsh shadows contrasted against shots with added saturation. It makes the movie look ugly at times. The lighting also effectively kills off the atmosphere of the Batcave. The Batcave has always looked dark and mysterious, but now it looks like any other warehouse. There's nothing cool about it anymore. On top of the bad lighting, this is easily the worst CGI in the entire DCEU. This is the worst CGI I've seen in a DC movie since the Green Lantern. This whole movie looks like a PS4 game and there's a lot of CG, so we almost never get a break from it. It's just hideous. We returned to Themyscira for a bit and it looks almost nothing like it did in Wonder Woman. It's so ugly here. And look at this fake news broadcast. This shit looks straight out of Birdemic. It's hilariously bad. The climax is CG, the effects are CG, and the villain is CG, and it all just looks awful. A downside to the Justice League is that I have a complaint on every single member of it. Every single one. I'll start with Superman. Yeah, he gets revived. I'd say that's a spoiler, but everyone knew he'd be back. When the movie starts, we see
Oh my god! What's wrong with your face?
Okay, some backstory here. When they did the reshoots for Justice League, Henry Cavill had grown out a mustache for the Mission Impossible movie and he was not allowed to shave it. So Warner Brothers were forced to cover the mustache with CGI and... fuck. It looks bad. It's not always this bad, but the opening scene is clearly a shot where they had to remove the mustache and it looks awful. He looks like he just got done at the dentist office and the swelling hasn't gone away yet. This is a terrible way to open the film and this scene is totally pointless. They didn't need this at all, so why include something so off-putting in the beginning of your movie? On top of that, his suit has had a downgrade. They used a thinner fabric for this movie, so the metal padding used for his muscles is too visible, and the whole thing looks as artificial and phony as his stupid face. But here's the thing. Character-wise, this is the first time Henry Cavill has felt like Superman. He doesn't really come in till the climax, but he acts like Superman here. He's lighthearted, makes some quips, and get this, he actually doesn't destroy buildings here. He moves them away from danger. Holy fuck, this is Superman! This whole thing does contradict the previous movies, but I didn't like those anyway, so I'll allow it. His final scene is a callback to the Christopher Reeves era Superman, which is a little corny, but still nice. Though part of me is confused as to how Clark is going to explain to everyone that he's alive now, and that it's in no way connected to Superman's return. In fact, the whole process of Superman coming back to life should have been its own movie. When he first comes back, He is confused and attacks the Justice League. With how much this universe loved to make Superman look like a bad guy, it's weird that they didn't make an entire film out of the only scene that actually gave a good reason as to why Superman would do these bad things. Part of me also thinks Superman might be a bit too powerful because his strength sort of downplays the rest of the Justice League. The only time it really offends me is with how easily he takes out Wonder Woman. She went toe to toe with Doomsday but can't give Superman a run for his money? I find that hard to believe. Speaking of Wonder Woman in this movie, for the most part I think her character is fine, but they emphasize that she shut herself down for 100 years, which not only taints the ending to the Wonder Woman movie, but also seems to contradict the Wonder Woman sequel, which is going to take place in 1984. They give her a pointless scene in the beginning of the movie where she stops a bank bombing, which is entertaining I guess, but it feels like Warner Brothers desperately trying to remind us that we like Wonder Woman, because otherwise the scene doesn't affect the rest of the movie. But my major complaint with her is that Gal Gadot's acting is inconsistent. At times, she's just as good as she's always been, but at other times, it seems like she just doesn't care. Look at her in this scene where Superman is about to attack Cyborg. Watch how bad her delivery is.
Kal-El, no!
Wow. Could we try that one more time? Luckily, her chemistry with Bruce Wayne is still great. In fact, I think that I would rather watch these two fuck than watch this movie. Bruce Wayne is a bit of a mixed bag in this film. Ben Affleck is just as good as he was before, but he's not as dark and brooding as he was last time, which I actually don't like. If there's any character you play dark and brooding, it's Batman, especially if he's an older, more worn out Batman. I guess their logic is that he's not as bitter this time around because Superman inspired him into believing in good. But boy, doesn't that contradict the last time we saw him.
Superman was a beacon to the world. You were never a god. You were never even a man.
On top of that inconsistency, they gave Batman some comedic bits this time around. You can have Batman be funny, but it has to keep in character. Batman is cool and reserved, so any comedy with him should reflect that.
What's this do? Huh? I assume it works off concentration.
How'd you do that?
You weren't concentrating.
You won't do that again.
Unless I want to.
In this movie, when his comedy works, it's good, but when it doesn't, it's totally out of character.
What are your superpowers again?
I'm rich.
That's fine.
Yeah. Oh, something is definitely bleeding.
No, Batman doesn't complain.
How did you get the house back from the bank?
I bought the bank.
And that's another good Batman line.
Well, I knew you didn't bring me back because you like me.
I don't. Not.
Really? Could you ever see Batman be uncomfortable or awkward? The real Batman would just give a sly smile. He does smile at one point and it looks retarded. Batman would never give this type of dumbass smile. It's clear to me that neither director know how to play Batman for comedy, but Batman's quips are far from the worst ones in the movie. The other three members of the Justice League have no real backstory, so it's already hard to care about them. This particularly upsets me with Cyborg, as I feel his origin story could make for a good movie. But this is what we got. Character-wise, I think he's fine. He's pretty much exactly what he needed to be, but everything else about him is off. The CG on him is really bad, and his design is so convoluted and awful looking. It's a mess of metal. It looks like a Michael Bay creation. It's so jaggedy, and I wish they just smooth him out, and what the fucker? You just did it! That's how he should have looked the whole movie! Why did you save that for the ending? If you knew it looked bad, why not fix it? My biggest complaint with Cyborg is the actor who played him. This guy is so wooden and uninteresting. He has no charisma and no screen presence, which I think we can all agree is something a superhero needs. I actually looked this guy up to see what other movies he'd been in, and he hadn't been in any films until the DCEU. He had a minor role in a TV show, and that's it. They picked someone with little experience to play this role, and it really shows in his performance. He has no chemistry with the other actors. I kind of rolled my eyes at the casting of Jason Momoa as Aquaman. It seemed like overcompensating. Aquaman has had a reputation of being a lame, sissy character, so it looked like DC decided to cast the most masculine-looking man they could afford to play this role. So they gave it to this human Cherokee tampon. But to his credit, Jason Momoa gives a pretty good performance, and Aquaman actually seems cool in this movie. He's stern, reserved, and has a badass sense of honor to him. It almost gives me hope for the Aquaman standalone film. The downside with him though is that his dialogue is terrible. It's fine throughout most of the film, but when it gets to the climax, then he starts to become annoying. He is constantly shouting 90s catchphrases and it is cringeworthy.
My man. All right.
He's one step away from. But for the most part, I think he works quite well in this movie. The person I have the most issue with is Barry Allen. He feels more like Wally West than Barry Allen, but I'm okay with that since I think the Flash as a comedic sort of character complements his superpower more. But his whole character just feels like a cynical attempt to replicate Tom Holland as Spider-Man. It's the same awkward dweeby comedy and it is so pandering. He never made me laugh. I always found him annoying. He has no real motivation to join the Justice League. He just does. Aquaman and Cyborg turn Bruce and Diana down at first, but join them later out of convenience. Barry Allen has a sad scene where his father asks him to stop visiting him in jail and move on with his life, but it's followed by this goofy scene of him fanboying over Batman and saying he needs friends. It's a complete tonal shift. His suit is just awful. It's a mess of random pads thrown together with strings, and it's so convoluted that I can't see any way he could ever put this thing on. And it does no favors for his face. He just looks like a fish half the time and the running looks really goofy. Honestly, he was my least favorite person in the entire team. I don't mind having a younger character because that brings another dynamic to the team, but not when it's this dweeby Tom Holland ripoff. It's just hard for me to even view him as a character half the time because he just feels like the product of market research. He probably should have been an arrogant hotshot character, sort of like how Wally West was portrayed in the animated Justice League series. Steppenwolf is probably the most generic and bland supervillain I've seen in a long time. He's just a demon dude who wants to take over the world and has his own putty army. That's it. It's as forgettable as it gets. Is this really the villain you want to bring the Justice League together for? You want them to go up against someone this forgettable? What a fucking waste. This guy should have been a big deal, but he really isn't, and this movie came out less than a year before Infinity War, and he has none of the presence that Thanos had. He's so boring, and he talks about his mother more than Sephiroth and Norman Bates combined. He never feels like an imposing figure. Once Superman comes in, he gets knocked around like a rag doll, and it's so one-sided and boring. The only reason he is able to take out the Amazons and Atlanteans is because the movie needs to happen. The whole fight with him is with a red sky, and I don't know how I feel about it. Snyder's version was in the dark, and while it complemented the lighting better, it's still unappealing. And does the DCEU really need another climax in the dark? The red could work, but it just makes the awful CGI stand out more. The whole climax is so obviously just the actors on a green screen, and it lacks any sort of realism because I know nothing is there. None of the hits register, the set design is so uninspired. This looks like any evil tower. I really don't like how it downplays the other members of the Justice League because it just comes down to wait for Superman to do the hard stuff. And when he does come in, it looks even more like a lame video game. Look at this. This looks like a shitty DC fighting game. And they have this ham-fisted dialogue trying to shoehorn in that these guys are supposed to feel like a family, but it's just as forced here as it was in Suicide Squad. When the movie ends, it shows Bruce Wayne and Alfred planning to turn the old Wayne Mansion into the Hall of Justice. I don't think that's going to do Batman's secret identity any favors. After the credits, we get a scene where good old cuntfuck McKillYourself and Deathstroke plan to start their own league, and it's clear that they have learned absolutely nothing by keeping this fucker around. Honestly, what else can I say? Justice League is a fucking mess. It's exactly what it feels like. It's a miserable Snyder film that was turned into a campy Whedon film. The tone is totally out of place for the rest of the DCEU, and it's even more jarring here than it was in Suicide Squad. At least that film was so far removed from the others that the shifting tone didn't contradict anything. Here, it totally does because the last time we had Batman and Superman was in a miserable pile of shit. Now it's a fun piece of shit. I can't say I hate this movie. In fact, part of me kind of likes it as a bad movie. It's dumb as shit, but I'm never miserable watching it. It's just kind of annoying at times. But much like Batman v Superman, this movie caused a lot of damage to the DCEU. This time though, the damage it caused was to its own fans. There are people who actually like the Snyder stuff, and this contradicts everything they liked. I don't think what they liked was any good, but I can see why this would piss them off. There are a bunch of fans who demand to see a cut of this movie by Zack Snyder, which is hilarious because I can guarantee guarantee that cut wouldn't be any good either. If you want the Snyder cut of Justice League, just take out the color and the humor and then slow the movie down so that the runtime is 3 hours. There you go. That's the Snyder cut. This movie also damaged the whole image of the Justice League. When I think of the Justice League, I always imagine Superman front and center, but now Wonder Woman is always front and center, no doubt because she is the only one out of all of them that had a legitimately good film. And all the Blu-ray copies of this movie spoil Superman coming back right on the cover. This whole thing is a mess. There's a lot to complain about with Justice League, and if you were invested in the DCEU, I could see how this would kill it for you. But for someone like me who never thought the DCEU was any good, I found myself enjoying this movie kind of ironically. I think some of the humor works, I like seeing more of Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot, and I'm thankful that Henry Cavill finally got to act like Superman, and I'll even go as far as to say that I enjoyed Aquaman, which is a shock, but so much of this movie doesn't work in this universe. Not that it really can, because this universe already shot itself in the foot just 2 movies ago, but if you take it out of context, it's just kind of a dumb comic book movie that feels like it's 10 years older than it actually is. The final score for Justice League is a 4 out of 10. I can't really say I recommend this movie to fans of the DCEU, but your average moviegoer may enjoy this. It's just a dumb comic book movie that you turn your brain off for. If I had to rank the DCEU based on what my favorite films in it are, then I would say Wonder Woman is number 1, with Justice League as a very, very, very distant second, followed by Suicide Squad, then Man of Steel, then Batman v Superman. Obviously, these aren't necessarily in order of quality, but this is just my personal enjoyment. So that's it for DeCEmbUr, guys. I hope you enjoyed this series, because I sure fucking didn't. Other than Wonder Woman, I just watched shitty movie after shitty movie. I need to go back to reviewing video games. Hopefully the next one I play won't be a giant piece of crap.